Hey everybody, this is MyCollectables coming back with another video, and the Queen's Court had a great interview with David Yu just this today. It was absolutely amazing. If you don't know what the Queen's Court is, it's Lori. She's a great member of the Veve community who hosts these like Twitter Spaces interviews every week called Queen's Court. It's a great place for tons of information about what's going on in Veve, and she got the chance to interview David Yu today. And, if you go to her actual, Twitter page and follow her, you can actually see the recording is there. It's live. You can go and like check it out. You can listen to the whole thing, and you got to go listen to this interview. I did a recap video of the interview that happened with Matt Gondak just a day or so ago with David, and that was also great. But this interview has got lots of different stuff in it, more to talk about, and she asked him some great questions. So I'm going to do a quick little recap, just the stuff that I took from it, but you got to go listen to the whole thing and make sure you're going there and following, Queen Veve all the time, just for these interviews, because she's interviewed a ton of great people. So I'll put that link actually in the description of the video for you, so you can just head right over there. So let's just actually bring up now my notes about it right here, which is actually quite something. This is quite an actual big interview that happened. And like I said, Lori asked a ton of questions, right? So let's get right into it right here. The Spider-Man wallet. So this is the thing that's going around. And she asked right away, pretty much in the first like 10 or 15 minutes, about this wallet. This is the one where there's all these, Spider-Man FAs that are in there. And like, what's going on with that? Because the community was asking, and you got to go listen to the whole thing, how David Hughes explains it. But basically, it's the result of what they said about cleaning up the bot usage back in the day, and like kind of getting all of these NFTs from these accounts and putting them in one place or in a couple of different wallets. Like, it's basically like he described cleaning the whole thing up. You got to listen to his whole description to find out everything he said about it. But basically, these are still out there. They're not burned. Okay. They may be coming back into circulation if the people who have these accounts that were kind of like locked up, if they actually get their act together and, KYC and all this kind of stuff or whatever they got to do, that those collectibles could end up back out there. So, they may be burned or they may be kept locked. We don't know. And, they don't know either, but they are available. They are there. They just aren't going to be in the marketplace or anything like that. And so that people were wondering if Veve was doing crazy stuff. This is just a result of them cleaning up all of those nefarious accounts and kind of, consolidating, I guess, where all the stuff was. So go make sure you listen to what David Hughes says about that in the actual interview. The second thing they talked about, and they talked about tons of stuff, but just one thing I noticed too is, Veve's logo and how they talked about how like Dan basically designed the old one in the kitchen because, they're wondering why the logo was done. Was there some sort of issue in the past about some sort of copyright issues with other logos that look similar example? But there isn't at all. They just wanted a refreshing brand to go after a wider audience and do marketing with, attracting a larger demographic and talking to the heart of what Veve's all about, And so that's why they had the new logo. So that was interesting. They talk about that for quite a bit too, right? Also, David Yu then went back in time and he talked a little bit about 2022 and these crazy time demands. And, because of delays that we've had, and they spent tons of 2022 dealing with bots and then doing payout features, like these are massive things they took on that took a ton of time and caused major delays in all these other areas that they didn't anticipate. And if they hadn't done these kind of things, they would be way ahead. So, now Mitch is in place. They talked about how he's pushing things forward. They have timelines in place internally and everything is great. But those are major things that cause huge delays. Spent tons of work on that in the previous year in 2022. So that's another interesting little tidbit. Then, Lori, Queen Veve is asking him a ton of things about OMI. And you really got to listen to that whole thing because he breaks down all this stuff about the OMI and, the token and exchanges and stuff and how, it's not going to be on multiple exchanges. Yeah, one company, he said, one exchange they thought about putting on went under actually, and if he would have actually signed that deal, a lot of people would have lost their OMI apparently. So like there's all sorts of things around that, and he talked a little, a lot about like why it's not on multiple exchanges, and stuff, and all the stuff that they're going to do with OMI, bringing it where you can go and get NFTs, with it, or using it more in the VeVeVerse, giving it more things like that, as opposed to just putting it on a whole bunch of exchanges, because that's very difficult to do apparently. So that's a whole section in there you got to listen to as well. Then they talked about VeVeVerse VeVeVerse a bit coming, 20 in Q1 and Q2. Your branded items, in the store, like maybe companies, IPs that they have doing like branded furniture or something, like all these kind of interesting things they're going to do to, and also Omi that's going to be used in there as well. And all these fun things they're going to do to kind of make this whole experience even more entertaining for everybody. And that's really cool as well, right? So they talked also about MCP points, and because Lori asked a good question too, just about like, why can't they merge, with the have the counts like, from the past. And they talked about it would just be a crazy endless task, of huge numbers and huge delays and all sorts of stuff. So they went with a simplified version of what they're going to do with MCP. They get into that too. So make sure you listen to the interview and talk, you can hear a little bit more about how David Yu explains that whole thing, right? He talked about attracting new users, making things easy, getting new verticals in like, the Lambo and stuff like that, and easing KYC entries and making fun utility in here and more entertainment sort of aspect with it. That's what the whole VeVeVerse is about, gamification and features and all sorts of stuff, and creating this whole kind of thing. This is what they're able to do that they're not able to do in the beginning because of, technology and all sorts of stuff. So this is part of the brand. This is part of the thing. It's a really good portion right there. I loved hearing David talk all about this, and Lori asked great questions about that as well. They also talked about this withholding of mint numbers, like when they have drops and they withhold the first 40, like why did they do that, and it's a lot to do with licensors requiring stuff, and it's all that. So they talk about that, about why they hold them back, and all this stuff. Like I said, it has a lot to do with licensors holding back and, retaining some because that's what their agreement is, because they're testing things out, licensors are testing stuff out apparently. And so there's all sorts of interesting things they talk about in mint numbers as well and why they're holding those. So you're going to want to listen to that part of the video. That comes more in the 3/4 of the way through, right? They also talked about Disney. So then, Alex G popped up there and answered a couple questions about utility and stuff. Like, for example, Disney and Marvel, how they're not so, keen on doing these utility things that we may have seen. So it's still on the table with them. They're still talking about it. I mean, we're talking about the golden moments here and stuff like that. They are very particular, these licensors, right? And like what they want to do. So like, it's not off the table, but it's probably stuff we've never seen before, in regards to utility and features and things like that for sure. Right. So that's all little things like that to talk about. Right. And then of course, the roadmap ahead, basically, David Yu just talked about exciting times ahead and making sure they deliver on their promises and having new kinds of utility in place and stuff like that. You've got to listen to the whole thing. Make sure you go over and do that. But this is just a quick recap. I thought it was really fascinating. The more you listen to David, the more you find out more about the company. Each time you listen to an interview, you get more information. It makes you feel better, for me at least, about the project and about where things are going, because you start to understand where their head is at. And so that's why it's very key that you listen to the whole thing. So I put the link in the description of this video to that, whole interview, and make sure, like I said, you're following Lori on Twitter and always attending those Queen's Courts, because she had Al Khan on. She had me on one time, which is crazy, and other people as well. Tons of important people, way more than me, especially like David Yu. And this is a great interview. Anyway, I hope you liked the video. Make sure you go listen to the interview. I'll talk to you in the next video, and happy collecting.